He was a decorated Marine captain fresh from war zones. Yet in his own upscale neighborhood, it took just one blackout for a dozen officers to aim guns at him and order his loyal dog to attack. What happened next didn't just save his life, it exposed a truth Beacon Heights tried to bury. Stay until the end, because this dog's memory didn't just defy a command. It rewrote a city's future. Dear viewer, what you are about to witness is not just a story. It is a powerful testament to the quiet power and pursuit of justice in places most people ignore. If this is your first time here, I warmly invite you to share where you are watching in the comments below. And if stories like this move you, challenge you, or make you think, consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon. We share voices that deserve to be heard every day. Thank you for being here. Now, let's get into the story. The night Beacon Heights lost its lights. Something destined to break through every illusion of safety settled like a cold shadow across Savannah's upscale district. One moment, the glittering skyline buzzed with the hum of modern life luxury, high-rises alive with screens, glass-walled lobbies, reflecting chandeliers, the distant hum of rooftop HVAC units. The next, silence. Electricity winked out. Streetlights collapsed into pools of darkness. Security cameras stopped recording. Wi-Fi signals shattered like glass in the air. The temperature dropped, and a hush swallowed everything. Among the residents, panic responded faster than sirens. The digital voice-activated blinds snapped shut. Phone calls dropped mid-conversation. Water's steady drip through heat pipes echoed in cavernous condos. Security officers clicked flashlights on like afterthoughts, while inside the Beacon Heights Security Center, frantic technicians scrolled through failing systems, eyes wild with disbelief. Then came the confirmation this wasn't just a grid failure. Someone had engineered it. 4 blocks away, Captain Elijah Moore sat in his brand-new rental SUV headlights, blind in the engulfing darkness. He stared out at the eerily deserted streets, rare for a suburban district plagued with nightlife. His service boots tapped the brake as he glanced at his dog Valor in the passenger seat. The German Shepherd, retired from military service, leaned forward, nose sniffing the frozen air. Elijah, a freshly retired Marine captain, just returned from Afghanistan, after 15 years of deployment, felt that shift again, the sudden reversal from routine to survival mode. The scent of danger was unmistakable. Just before he lost internet connection, an emergency alert had popped on his phone. Critical infrastructure breach, immediate lockdown of Beacon Heights District, residents and vehicles deemed non-authorized. For Elijah, non-authorized meant anyone without preset biometric identification for the district's mid-rise towers, including him. So even he, a citizen now living among them, was labeled suspect by his own community. Valor stiffened and let out a low growl. Elijah followed the dog's gaze to an imposing security gate ahead barrier poised mid-lift. Sensors blinked red, and mechanical clicks echoed twice before the gate slammed shut. Beyond it, patrol dogs barked. Security lights traced dark forms among parked EVs. 2 armored security trucks blocked the north lane. Above it all hung the sharp cry of helicopters, some municipal, others unidentified. A cold surge of adrenaline pushed Elijah into motion. He reached to open his door. A 1,000-watt spotlight erupted, setting the night ablaze and slicing Valor's shadow into the asphalt. Rebels in uniform surged from behind the truck, wearing thin, soulless badges imprinted with the Beacon Heights emblem. Bellowed commands shattered what little composed silence remained. Show your hands. Now. Drop the weapon. Step out of the vehicle. it became painfully clear they believed he was the threat. Elijah lifted his hands out the window, Valor flat on the floorboard. Behind them inside the car, nestled in the center console, was his EDC, multi-tool, no firearm, no illegal device, just life-saving kit. That was enough. The sight of raised weapons made Elijah's veins pulse. His military discipline snapped awake. Move slowly, mouth open, no sudden breaths, every inch measured. He stepped out, hands raised, Valor emerging at his side. A woman barked into a radio. A man pointed a taser. Another aimed a gun, like every second counted. I'm Captain Elijah Moore, United States Marine Corps. I live here. This is my dog, Valor. I'm not Elijah's voice, cut off as a uniformed officer barked dog down. The command sent Valor whirling. All Valor needed next was a snap of authority, and the team would obey. The dog pressed in front of his owner, easing into a protective stance. Sweat beaded Elijah's skin despite the cool air. Storm attack, someone yelled. Tracer beams of white and blue set on Valor like he'd been criminal. In an instant, the entire perimeter snapped to readiness. Elijah hollered, "No, you can't." But Valor's ears perked. His body froze. A sacred chord stretched taut between man and dog, humming in shared memory. Then, in a moment that split the night like thunder, Valor defied every order. He sprinted past the officers around their crossfire and slammed into Elijah. Then he did the unthinkable. He licked Elijah's face. A stunned silence. Gasps echoed. Flashlights wavered. Storm, the official K9, snarled, snapping toward Valor, only to be restrained by his handler's rigid arm. The assault thwarted the narrative and flipped the perspective in the officers' minds. Valor stood steadfast in the gap between breach and perception, between accusation and innocence. It was indisputable he recognized Elijah as his own. The uniformed officers froze. Commands died on their lips. Valor's undeniable devotion cracked the illusion of Elizabeth Heights' perfect containment. In that precise, electrifying second, everything changed. Security technicians at screens saw the prowler confronting patrolled zones. Officers stopped stunned. Houses with blackout curtains hesitated mid-lock, wondering if insider sabotage was a distraction. Down a jet-black corridor of flashing blue lights rafters of security hub, the site director's phone flashed. Images not of a criminal, but a returned warrior, framed unfairly, accompanied not by aggression, but loyalty. A double take the military stance, the dog's fawning embrace. Recognition snapped. Subtle alarm flickered. It felt like a story neither side wanted to unfold. Elijah inhaled Valor nuzzling him. The tension hung like a storm cloud frozen overhead. He saw the incredulous realization wash across the officers' faces. His mind raced. If he could only buy a moment more to talk, to diffuse, to reveal his identity beyond biased suspicion. The looming question pulsed in the cold night air. How had a trusted civilian like Elijah been misidentified as a threat? And who had orchestrated the blackout that provoked this aggressive response? Valor's inexplicable rescue rippled out of that moment, reframing a potential tragedy into something miraculous and deeply unsettling. The stage was set, the fishhook embedded, and nothing would ever be the same. But Beacon Heights had no inkling what was coming. And Elijah, he never forgot. That initial flash of recognition, his dog's voice breaking through the chaos, refusing to obey darkness. The rain began just after midnight, as if the sky had been holding its breath through the chaos. Captain Elijah Moore sat in the darkened living room of his temporary Beacon Heights townhouse, the silence broken only by the rhythmic tapping against the tall bay windows. Valor lay curled at his feet, chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. The dog had been quiet since the incident, no growls, no sudden shifts. But there was something in the way. He pressed against Elijah's boots, a quiet sentinel still reading the air for danger. Elijah barely noticed the coffee growing cold in his hands. His mind circled the confrontation like a hawk, tracing every detail, every face, every word. The way the officers had moved, the tone of the command, the absence of questions. He had seen that kind of aggression before in uniform in combat zones. But this wasn't Kabul. This was Beacon Heights, a supposed sanctuary for the city's elite. And yet it hadn't felt safe for even a minute. He hadn't told anyone. Not yet. Not even Amara. She arrived the next morning with the scent of cinnamon and firewood trailing behind her, carrying a paper bag of breakfast, and a wary look in her eyes. Amara was a civil rights attorney based in Boston, her work often too demanding for routine visits. But ever since Elijah returned from service, she'd made a point to be more present, to bridge the long, quiet years they'd spent on opposite ends of the world. Elijah opened the door before she knocked. She paused at the threshold, taking him in the unshaven jaw, the tired eyes, the posture too rigid for someone supposedly home. Without a word, she stepped inside. "I saw the power grid hack on the news," she said, setting the bag on the counter. But they didn't mention the armed confrontation. Elijah's jaw flexed. Of course not. They covered it like it was a technical glitch, not a pretext to unleash half the security division on one man and his dog. Amara sighed, reaching for 2 mugs. "Tell me everything." And so he did. Slowly, carefully. From the moment the lights went out to Valor's defiant act of loyalty. He watched her expression change, not shocked, but sharpened. She had seen too many cases like this in too many forms: excessive force, racial bias, misidentification. The method always evolved, but the motive rarely did. When he finished, Amara sat down, fingers steepled. They were trying to manufacture consent to make you the intruder. And had Valor obeyed that command, I wouldn't be sitting here. Elijah's voice was calm, but the edge beneath it was unmistakable. Amara nodded. They saw a black man in a luxury SUV after dark and assumed the worst. The rest was tactical theater. There was a long silence. Then Elijah asked, "Why now? Why me? I've barely been back a month." Amara tilted her head. "You didn't just return, Elijah. You moved into Beacon Heights. You crossed into a space designed to exclude people like us unless we're serving drinks or fixing pipes. You disrupted a boundary they never say aloud, but defend in every policy, every glance." She wasn't wrong. Elijah had noticed it too, the way neighbors' smiles faded the moment he turned away. The way he was asked more than once, "Are you visiting someone?" despite having his name on the lease. He had tried to shrug it off, to stay quiet. But Valor had refused silence. That act of rebellion had exposed a crack in the mask. Amara reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "I want you to see something." Inside were printed documents, maps and confidential memos, courtesy of a whistleblower she'd been working with for months. Patterns of increased surveillance in neighborhoods with high concentrations of black residents. Unpublished security protocols showing Beacon Heights' pre-approved watch list. Photos, timelines, even a training manual advising security officers on subtle de-escalation tactics for non-resident individuals exhibiting urban risk profiles. Urban risk profiles. The term rang in Elijah's ears like a shot. "They wrote it down," he murmured. "They always do," Amara said, "because they never believe anyone will hold them accountable." He looked up at her, the weight of a decade's worth of missions behind his eyes. What if I do? Amara met his gaze without blinking. Then we start something bigger than either of us. But it's not just about proof, Elijah. It's about voice. You have to let people see this, hear it. You're not a nameless headline. You're a Marine with a purple heart and a story that makes people listen. Elijah looked at Valor still curled at his feet. The dog lifted his head slightly, as if understanding that his refusal to obey had triggered a chain reaction that couldn't be reversed. You know what this means, right? Elijah said, voice low. No more peace. No more blending in. Amara leaned closer. Maybe peace isn't silence. Maybe it's being seen and choosing not to disappear. Later that day, she helped him draft a public statement, carefully worded, calm, professional, but honest. In it, Elijah described the blackout, the confrontation, the fact that the only thing that saved him from a deadly misunderstanding was a dog that remembered who he truly was. He didn't name names yet, but he made it clear that the Beacon Heights security team had acted with unjustifiable force based solely on assumptions that had no place in a society that claimed to be free. By nightfall, his phone buzzed with reporters requesting interviews. Some he ignored. Others he carefully scheduled. Valor never left his side. That week, Amara stayed with him. They walked the neighborhood twice a day, no longer trying to blend in, but walking like they belonged. She made coffee in the mornings, took calls from her clients in between helping Elijah organize documents and footage. And every evening they sat on the porch, watching the security vehicles patrol like silent ghosts. Their presence didn't fix anything overnight, but it shifted something. They weren't hiding anymore. And Beacon Heights, with all its curated exclusivity and polished gates, couldn't look away from them either. Amara's presence was more than comfort. It was clarity, a reminder that the path forward would be exhausting but not solitary. She was both witness and warrior. And in her company, Elijah remembered what it meant to live deliberately to reclaim space, not with fury, but with firm, unshakable truth. Elijah sat in the mission briefing room of Beacon Heights' private security precinct. The overhead lights were dimmed, casting long shadows off the polished oak table. Beside him, Valor remained calm alert, his dark eyes following every move. The room had once felt like an impenetrable fortress security at its finest. Now it seemed brittle, fragile, and as haunted as Elijah was by the memory of that midnight raid. He glanced at Amara across the table. Her papers lay in careful stacks, his formal complaint, documented video files of Valor's stand-down, the drafts of his public statement. Together, they had worked through the night, bringing precision where chaos had reigned. Now the moment had come to present their case face to face to the panel assembled across from them, the precinct's chief, 2 senior officers, and a lawyer from the Beacon Heights Legal Committee. Neither of them spoke. Elijah could sense Amara's strength beside him, steady and unwavering. He took in the stern faces before him. Uniform's crisp expressions guarded people trained to believe authority was unquestionable. Now they were forced to answer not to the chain of command, but to evidence. The chief spoke first. His voice was measured, polite. Captain Moore, you've submitted serious allegations that your dog refused to follow a lawful order, that our officers may have acted on bias. That's what we're here to hear. Elijah breathed in the hush of expectation. That's correct. His voice was low, resonant with conviction. On August 17th midnight, officers were dispatched to intercept me ostensibly as a burglary suspect. I was at home. I complied fully. Valor was present, A K-9 unit arrived and issued an attack order. Valor refused. That refusal was not a technical failure. It was intentional. And that split-second act changed the course of events. Amara presented the video. The screens flickered to life. Green dashboard lights. Valor's ears, flattened eyes, locked on Elijah's hand, not the handler. The response was immediate tension in the room. Even the chief's jaw clenched. "Explain," the chief said. Elijah leaned forward. He paused, drawing on every moment he'd lived and relearned since returning. "Valor and I share a bond built in combat. We served together in Kunar province. He saved my life. But last night, his greatest act was to protect me from my own home. He recognized me. He recognized our relationship. He defied orders because he was trained to keep me safe, not attack a man on his ranch." The lawyer shifted. "Your assertion implies that our protocol is flawed, that K-9 units in residential contexts aren't trained to confirm human identity. That breeds risk." Amara responded calmly. The video shows Valor first seeking visual recognition, then physical connection. That isn't protocol. It's instinct. That instinct saved your precinct from liability, from hurting an innocent man. Your system acted not just on suspicion, but on correlation, dark vehicle at night, black homeowner. That's dangerous precedent. Silence dropped. Valor sighed softly, leaning into Elijah's leg. Elijah felt the weight of every word. He continued, "I served 5 tours under rules of engagement that required positive identification. Last night, no such policy existed at home. That's the change we're asking for." The chief cleared his throat. "Captain, we're responsible for public safety. Residents must feel secure. Protocols exist to protect them." Elijah met his gaze. "And you should also protect those you serve. If racial assumptions inform decisions, even subconsciously, you're not protecting anyone. You're policing a stereotype." A tense moment passed. Then the precinct lawyer spoke. "Are you proposing protocol reform?" Elijah shifted. He looked at Amara, then back at the panel. "Yes, training updates. K-9 units must verify human recognition before engagement. Officers should be required to confirm identity through a non-aggressive means. De-escalation first. Bias awareness. And every stop or dispatch to a homeowner's residence must involve this protocol." Amara stood supporting him. "Additionally, we request an official apology, a public acknowledgement that protocol failed, that Valor's actions exposed it. You must establish a civilian oversight committee specifically for home interactions." The room fell silent. Valor raised his head, ears twitching. The chief exhaled. "That's a lot." Elijah saw in his eyes the crossroads between the safety of status quo and the hazard of real change. "It's necessary," he said softly. "We can pretend everything is fine after a blackout and attack command. Or we can improve, so no one else has to hold a dog in their arms, because that dog recognized their humanity better than a man with a badge." The chief glanced at his lawyer. The lawyer's face remained unreadable. Then the chief nodded slowly. "We'll convene the committee. We'll review protocols. Compensation will be considered. And we'll schedule a town hall with representation from community advocates and yourself." Amara gently squeezed Elijah's hand. Relief, but also resolve, a calm before the next wave. As they stood to leave, Valor rose and followed them through the door. Outside, in the parking lot, morning light filtered over the dog's fur. Elijah knelt, offering his hand. Valor curled against him, tail wagging lightly. Elijah stood, meeting Amara's eyes. "It begins here." Amara smiled softly. "In the dark," she said, "you brought light." They walked away together, side by side, Valor padding between them. Behind them, the precinct doors closed, but as they did, a small scratch of change lingered in the air. Elijah awoke before dawn in his small Beacon Heights home. Valor curled by his side as if he'd never moved. The night before had left ripples running through both of them, public scrutiny, the promise of reform, and a bond that had been tested in more ways than one. As he stepped outside into the crisp morning air, the weight of what had occurred settled more heavily. Valor rose with gentle grace, eyes bright with something beyond mere loyalty. Today, Elijah realized, would not only test human conviction, it would reveal what Valor remembered. Back at the precinct, tensions were just beginning to simmer as officers prepared for the upcoming protocol meeting. The chief arranged tables in the briefing room, his face unreadable, but his posture stiff with anticipation. Elijah and Amara arrived early, Valor at their heels, his presence both an anchor and a symbol. Coffee machines hissed. Officers exchanged cautious nods. The moment carried a charge that buzzed beneath every unspoken word. Elijah could feel it. Valiant's fur bristling slightly against his leg, a silent reminder that the stakes went far beyond paperwork. The meeting began as planned senior staff, legal advisors, community representatives all at the table. Their agenda: evaluate Elijah and Amara's proposed reforms. The chief started with introduction, then motioned to Elijah. He rose, Valor seated patiently behind him, ears pricked. I want to talk about one thing beyond words, Elijah began softly. Something Valor remembered. He paused, letting the room straighten its shoulders. Valor is not just an example because he didn't attack. He's an example because he remembered who he served. A quiet rustle passed among the officers. Elijah continued. He remembered me not because of paperwork, not because of ID tags or voice commands, because we trained together under fire. He remembers my command patterns, the energy in my posture when I'm vulnerable, because we survived. That memory isn't protocol, it's relationship. He clicked play on the video Amara had provided. Valiant's slow walk toward Elijah based on voice and body language, then the paw on his knee as if offering reassurance. Watching it unfold on screen, the room fell silent. The legal counsel shifted uncomfortably. A few officers exchanged glances. Elijah pressed forward. Our reforms aren't just about adding steps. They're about recognizing that trust formed in conflict shouldn't evaporate in calm. Valor's memory saved a man last night. Let it help shape the system so it saves a community. Discussion shifted toward specifics. K-9 handlers proposed attending bonding workshops, reinforcing relationships before deployment in civilian contexts. A security officer suggested adding recognition drills into standard K-9 training for home visits. Valor sat quietly through it all, his gaze distant, as though replaying scenes only he and Elijah knew. After lunch, the chief spoke again. Your point is clear, Captain. Valor remembered. That memory matters. We'll adopt a pilot program including bonding certification, identification, recognition drills, and mandatory de-escalation protocols before K-9 deployment. Heads nodded. Amara allowed herself a small smile. Elijah's heart soared. Valor's ears flicked. The dog understood. He offered his paw once more, touching Elijah's boot gently, and the room softened. When the official meeting ended, Elijah walked Valor into the sunlit courtyard. The chief and a few officers followed, curious and changed. Sheriff Martin, a longtime local officer, approached Elijah with a tired but genuine expression. Your dog, Captain. I can't shake what he did. It made us all reconsider. Elijah nodded. That was Valor's truth. Let it help our truth, too. Later, Elijah and Amara returned to Beacon Heights Community Outreach Center to review training materials. Valor lay quietly at their feet as they drafted new modules, interactive canine-human bonding exercises, community familiarization, visits, simulated home visit practices with handlers and dogs together. Amara laughed softly when Valor nudged her hand as if urging them on. "He doesn't just remember Elijah," she said, smiling at the dog. "He remembers hope." By afternoon, local reporters gathered to cover the precinct's announcement of canine reforms. In the foreground stood Elijah and Valor Man and dog partners, both in conflict zones and community change. Elijah spoke. Valor's recognition was more than protocol failure. It was a lesson in loyalty. He showed us we can't rely solely on suspicion. We must build on relationships. We must remember what is worth protecting. He turned to Valor, brushing the dog's ears. Valor gazed back bright and sure. In that moment, their connection born in warfare, tempered by trust, became a catalyst for change. Valor hadn't remembered just Elijah. He'd remembered humanity itself. As the sun set on Beacon Heights that evening, a soft light settled across the precinct building. No longer just walls of steel and glass, but a space transformed by memory, humility, and renewed purpose. Valor walked beside Elijah, steps steady and calm. Today, the dog remembered loyalty, and tonight, Beacon Heights would remember how to live up to it. Elijah arrived at the city plaza just as the early morning light stretched its fingers across polished stone benches and flower beds blooming with spring's promise. Word had spread quickly. He and Valor were to be recognized for their role in reshaping Beacon Heights' approach to policing. The plaza, once a place of cautious greetings and polite distance, now pulsed with something deeper, a sense of confrontation met with compassion. Elijah moved through the crowd, with Valor at his side, the dog's chestnut fur catching the sun like a silent banner of hope. He spotted his old friend and mentor Deputy Chief Simon Harris, standing nervously near the steps. Harris's uniform bore signs of time and tarnished badges earned in decades of service. Yet in his eyes, there was a warmth that said, "I believe in this." As Elijah paused to greet him, Valor sat by his shoulder tail, brushing against the deputy's polished shoes. "We did it," Harris said quietly. His voice carried relief more than pride. "You did it." Elijah shook his head, offering Valor's head for a pet. "We," he said, meeting the deputy's gaze with quiet strength. "We did it together. For every officer who chose to listen and every neighbor who chose to believe." When the mayor stepped onto the dais, Mayor Nadine Blake, known for her guarded politics, Elijah felt tension tighten in the air. Yet instead of protocol speeches, she offered gratitude that felt earned. In times where we fear what we don't understand, this pair taught us to see. She gestured toward Valor. This dog reminded us that loyalty transcends fear, and that change is possible when we honor bonds over biases. Elijah looked out over the plaza, crowd families, neighbors, officers, veterans, local journalists. Behind them lay months of upheaval protests, town hall, confrontations, lawsuits, and late-night strategy meetings that often ended in exhaustion. In front of him lay something fragile but precious, a city beginning to rebuild trust. Valor nudged his hand, and Elijah crouched beside him. "This isn't the end," he said softly, more to the dog than the audience. "It's the beginning." The applause rose steady and measured, carrying the weight of new beginnings. In the weeks that followed, the K-9 unit retrained all handlers across Beacon Heights, accompanied by Elijah's own sessions, teaching officers how to listen to dogs, to neighbors, and to themselves. Valor stood as silent ambassador, sitting calmly beside visiting families, letting frightened children pat his head, while officers explained how rapport could replace suspicion. Back at the precinct's training yard, Elijah held a public demonstration. Valor navigated an obedience drill, and then, at Elijah's command, stepped into a mock home scenario, a staged setup with volunteers acting nervous. In one fluid sequence, Valor blocked an officer's approach. When a volunteer tensed, waited for Elijah's hand signal, and gently guided the volunteer forward, signaling safety. The audience watched in silent awe, many wiping tears, as Valor reminded them that protection and peace could coexist. Meanwhile, Elijah and Amara worked with community leaders to open Beacon Heights' first Police and Paws Outreach Center, a place where neighbors could visit dogs and learn about policing practices together. Local schools scheduled field trips. Athletes brought sports teams. Retirees found comfort in quiet corners. Valor became its most popular therapy dog, larger than life yet, tender, always willing to lean into trembling hands or rest his great head on someone's knee. Outside of public appearance, the change spread quietly. Officer Wilson, once unsure, became a leader in empathy-driven K-9 tactics, guiding training modules per Elijah's vision. Deputy Chief Harris rewrote the Academy's curriculum, adding sections on cultural humility, mental health, and conflict resolution. Many of the older officers who had resisted change now told stories of valor to their children, using real-life examples to remind them of the power of recognition and restraint. One evening, as Beacon Heights settled beneath street lights and the distant hum of evening traffic, Elijah and Valor walked home through the same neighborhoods that had once greeted them with tension. Now windows glowed with candles and smiles. On porches, neighbors paused to wave or wave back, gratitude shining in their eyes. Children ran to greet Valor, familiar and afraid no longer. At home, Elijah sat on the porch with Valor curled at his feet. Amara joined them, placing 2 steaming mugs of tea on the porch railing. They watched as streetlights flickered on illuminating smooth sidewalks and well-tended petals. Amara spoke first, voice soft and honest. "It's hard to believe this is the same place." Elijah watched Valor's contented sigh and replied, "It's not the same story anymore." Amara nodded. "Because you changed it." He shifted, hand burying in Valor's fur. "He did. We did." In the distance across the quiet street, the lights in Deputy Chief Harris's home winked off. The quiet of Beacon Heights wrapped around them like a promise. They'd fought not just for justice, but for understanding, for a city to recognize itself in its most loyal dog. That night, Elijah understood the reunion of man, and dog hadn't just saved him, it had saved them all. And as the final star appeared overhead, Valor lifted his head and looked up at Elijah and Amara, eyes wise with memory and hope. In that moment, the city breathed easier, its fractured heart sewn together again by loyalty, compassion, and a bond that reminded everyone what it meant to protect and to care. Elijah Cross's journey through the heart of Beacon Heights is more than the story of a decorated veteran returning home. It's a powerful testament to the enduring bond between human and animal, and a searing exposure of how deep-rooted prejudice can threaten even the most honorable. From the moment Elijah set foot in his childhood town, he encountered walls of suspicion built not by laws, but by unspoken biases. Despite his service, his uniform, and the sacrifices he made for his country, Elijah was treated not as a hero, but as an outsider. Yet even in the face of harassment, vandalism, and orchestrated attempts to silence him, he never stopped standing for truth. At the heart of this story is Valor the dog who once served by Elijah's side in war zones abroad, and who would, against all odds, reunite with him in the most critical moment back home. When the police ordered Valor, now renamed Apollo, to attack, what followed stunned the city. The dog didn't obey. Instead, he remembered. That refusal to harm his former partner triggered a chain reaction that unraveled years of corruption, misused authority, and quiet systemic racism in Beacon Heights. But Elijah's fight didn't end with that moment. He documented every violation, worked with journalists like Amara to shed light on the truth, and inspired honest officers like Wilson to take a stand. Through determination and integrity, he not only cleared his name, but reformed a city. Beacon Heights is now a different place, not perfect, but accountable. It's a town where children can learn that courage looks like standing tall, even when you're surrounded by those trying to make you feel small. The true lesson in Elijah's story is that silence never changes the world, voice does. Loyalty, when rooted in truth and love, can overcome even the most carefully orchestrated injustice. Valor's actions remind us that real strength is never about obedience. It's about honor. Elijah's refusal to settle, to walk away quietly, showed that justice isn't won in grand gestures, but in patient persistence, in daily bravery, in holding ground when it would be easier to retreat. In our own lives, whether we're confronting discrimination, witnessing unfairness, or struggling to find where we belong, Elijah's story tells us this: speak, document, stand with those who stand with you. Trust in the quiet power of your truth. Change may not come easily, but it will come if you do not waver. Let the bond between Elijah and Valor remind you that loyalty to what's right can truly reshape a community, and maybe even a country. If this story moved you, if you believe in the power of courage, loyalty, and truth to bring about real change, please subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us continue creating stories that matter, that inspire, and that bring us closer to a more just world. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next powerful journey.